And it is Indiana in the Morning, presented, as always, by First Commonwealth Bank here on WCCS, AM 1160 and FM 101.1. And on the air with us this morning, Paul Beston, who's written in a fascinating book, The Boxing Kings, When American Heavyweights Ruled the Ring. And really, back in the day, they ruled more than just the ring. They ruled the whole sports landscape. And good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Todd. Nice to be with you.
Oh, it's good to have you with us. There was a day when boxing, and particularly heavyweight boxing, captivated the nation the way that football does today, wasn't there?
It sure was, and it lasted for the better part of a century, and that's the period I chronicle in my book, which covers a period from the late 19th century when this whole thing really gets underway with a guy named John L. Sullivan, and runs all the way through the 20th century and ends right around the doorstep of the 21st century with the final battles between guys like Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. And not long after that, American representation in the heavyweight title essentially vanishes, and it's been close to 2 decades now since there's been an American heavyweight champion, and that's a remarkable fact considering that for most of the history I chronicle in the 20th century, almost all the champions were Americans with just a few exceptions.
And one of the interesting things to me about your book is I did what probably everybody else does, and they turn to their favorite fighter right away, and they have to read about their favorite fighter. In my case, it was Muhammad Ali. But right. I bet you hear that reaction a lot, huh? I had to go to my guy right away.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, these guys are kind of they come with their own fan bases even now, and the nature of this kind of story is that you can it's kind of modular. You can kind of jump in there and pick up the thread, and of course Ali's thread is one of the biggest and widest ones in the whole story.
Was his exit from the world stage as a fighting force the beginning of the decline, really, in interest in the heavyweight range?
Well, he was almost, by definition, an impossible act to follow, and he would have been the first one to tell you that. And so there was a sense in which, at least in the heavyweight ranks, there was a concern about how are we going to follow that guy. But he was followed by a legitimately great champion named Larry Holmes, who a lot of people don't remember. He just didn't have the kind of public appeal that Ali had. And for the years that he was champion, the lower weight fighters, this was sort of boxing's last great public golden age, was people like Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler and Thomas Hearns, and those are names people remember, really got most of the headlines and big money. But then, just as people started thinking maybe the heavyweights aren't the focus anymore, Mike Tyson came along. Mm-hmm. So Tyson was, became essentially an international, global star, almost on the level of Ali. I don't think anybody could really quite reach Ali's level. This is a guy who is known in continents all around the country, and for a period in the 70s was thought of as the most famous person in the world, including the Pope. Tyson didn't quite reach that, but he was an enormous figure, and he was such an electrifying presence in the ring in his early days that he brought the heavyweight division back with a vengeance. And
one of the interesting things to me about the book as well is that the descriptions of Mike Tyson so parallel the descriptions of the fighting style and the captivation that Jack Dempsey had back in his day. And the descriptions of the Dempsey fights, to me, these really stand out in your book. They're fascinating. They're great.
Well, thank you. Dempsey. It's funny. Dempsey has a special fascination for me, and he played a role in my youthful embrace of boxing, which I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s. And Ali, I saw the tail end of Ali there, and so many fights were on television back then, free television, so it was a lot more accessible than it is now. And I think that's a big part of the story too. But I just somewhere along the line became fascinated with the sport to the extent that I wanted to know more about the history, and so I was going to my public library and probably not bringing home the books my mom wished I was going to bring home, but I was bringing home books about Jack Dempsey, and his story really captivated me and really sent me into boxing history. So yeah, Tyson in fact to some degree consciously modeled himself after Dempsey. If you look at the old fights of Tyson when he comes down the ring, he was very very conscious about coming down without a robe. A lot of fighters like to come out with the flashy robes and the colors and all that stuff, and Ali enjoyed doing that, and a lot of other fighters did. And Tyson's approach was the opposite. It was, I'm a warrior. There's no embellishment. There's no fun and games. He's got no socks. He's got boots. He's got no robe on, and he even had his hair cut into this old-fashioned, it's called a hobo haircut back in the early 20th century, the same style that Jack Dempsey wore. So Tyson had a little bit of that in his mind. And another thing that made Tyson so interesting is that he had an historical awareness. He loved boxing history himself. So he was a heavyweight champion who was a fan. So it was quite interesting.
Watching the line of succession in the boxers from Joe Louis and on through the 50s with Marciano and then to Ali, of course, Liston in there, and all of these guys that marched onto the stage. And then for many of them, they were carried off of the stage. But one of the things that I found particularly interesting to me was in the late 70s when I was watching boxing, Ali's fights would be on TV, on free TV.
Yeah.
And right. He would have these bouts as he was declining in his skills where he would just hang around with the guy and get pounded for a while, and then all of a sudden Ali figured the last 30 seconds, if I come alive and then we get to the end of the match, end of the bout, I can steal these rounds, and at the end of the fight, if I'm flying, why, I'm going to get this win. And the Ernie Shavers bout with Ali, that really stood out to me as a young man growing up, and it's just a fascinating way that his mind worked, that he was able to figure that was going to be something that it not only captivated me, but millions of TV audience watchers.
Yeah, that exact fight had a big impact on me as well. I was 11 years old. I remember watching that fight in my living room with my father. And I think it was around the second round, and Shavers landed up. I mean, Shavers had the highest knockout percentage in heavyweight history. If you got hit with his right hand, you were out of commission, and he got it right on the button with Ali. And Ali just had, in addition to all of his other great assets in the ring, he probably had the greatest chin of any heavyweight also. And so he just took that punch, and he's just so resourceful. He found a way to clown and mock Shavers and swivel his hips and kind of make a game out of it. And what that did was lead Shavers to believe that he hadn't really hurt Ali that badly, and so he better conserve his energy and not, burn up too much energy. Well, if he did burn up more energy at that very point, he might have knocked Ali out. But that was just a masterful psychological move. And Ali, at that point in his career, he was just calling on every resource he had because, as you said, his physical gifts were declining rapidly, and his fights were becoming these great struggles for him to find another way to the finish line.
Paul Beston is our guest. His book is a tremendous book. It's The Boxing Kings, When American Heavyweights Ruled the Ring. As you were digesting all of these guys that you ended up putting into the book, was there one or two that you were not a particular fan of that sort of turned you and made you look at them in a new light?
Well, I don't think there was anyone I didn't like. I really kind of have affection for all of them in various ways. But I would say that the guy who I always admired, but probably didn't admire enough, was Joe Louis. And in writing that chapter in the book about him and really delving into the whole arc of his story, I just really got renewed appreciation for not only what a great champion he was, but really what an influential figure he was in America of that time, in social relations and relations between the races. I mean, what very few people seem to remember today about Joe Louis is that he was heavyweight champion. He became heavyweight champion 10 years before Jackie Robinson integrated the major leagues with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. And when Jackie Robinson took the field that day, Joe Louis was still heavyweight champion. And Jackie Robinson said on that day, I'm not sure if this day would ever have come without Joe Louis. And I think what Louis did was really pave the ground. He was alone. I mean, there was no black athlete at that time. Blacks were barred from baseball, as we all know, until Jackie Robinson. So he was the heavyweight champion of the world, holding the world's richest prize and beating mostly white opponents. And he managed to, because people slowly came to admire him so much because of his character and his dignity and his service in World War II and his courtesy and modesty. By the end of his career, he was fighting white opponents, and white fans in the arenas were rooting for him. And that's that's one of those subtle changes in social consciousness that is really important, and he played a great role in that, really for the better, and breaking down some old negative attitudes.
And at the end of his life, of course, which came to such a sad conclusion, we were every boxing match we watched, there was an update on Joe Louis and his health, and I just recall that. So we were at Joe Louis's grave in Arlington National Cemetery just a few weeks ago. Paul Beston,
wow.
Thank you so much for being with us today. So did enjoy the book. It's called The Boxing Kings When American Heavyweights Ruled the Ring. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I enjoyed it.